Moving on to the BISD Board of Trustees. I made little fancy maps for all the different wards. I did not make a fancy map for the BISD Board of Trustees. This map looks ridiculous because the way that the map, I looked everywhere for a high quality map of the districts for the Board of Trustees. This is the only map that I could find, the only current map. There is like a pretty okay one from like 2019, but this is a more updated version of the map. But it's like each one of these pages is an individual page in the document, and they're all at different scales to zoom in on each one of their districts. So I don't know, it's stupid. It's a very stupid map. But the only district here that has a contested election is Ward 3, that green district, this green district here, kind of in the downtown area. That is the only contested election. And the election is in between Treva Johnson and Woodrow Reece. We're about to talk about Woodrow Reece. Treva Johnson, I cannot find any information on her, really, of any substance. She has like Instagram and Facebook, and what she posts on there is like she does poetry. She's like a writer, and she goes to like BISD schools and does poetry events with students, I think. Like, I don't think that she's a BISD employee. And she does like poetry stuff at like local bars and things. On her election paperwork to get on the ballot, she lists her address and she lists her job as senior Shrug. I'm gonna put it in the chat. Senior SCROUHG. I don't know what that means, but so I'm sorry. I don't know much about Treva Johnson. I don't need to know much about Treva Johnson to know that I don't want to vote for Woodrow Reece, because we're about to talk. I know a whole lot of stuff about Woodrow Reece, and we're about to talk about it. Woodrow Reece has served on the BISD Board of Trustees for a long time, since 1998. He took a little hiatus, in that time from what makes that sound? I don't know. He took a little hiatus from serving on the Board of Trustees during the TEA takeover. If you don't know the story of the TEA takeover, we're going to talk about it here for a little bit. Woodrow Reece served on the BISD. This now is the sound of sneezing while in pain. Yeah, something like that. Maybe that's her job. Woodrow Reece served on the BISD Board of Trustees from 1998 until 2014, when the TEA in 2014 took over the school district. The TEA took over the school district because the FBI started investigating things that were going on inside of the school district, and lots of people were arrested and went to jail for lots of crimes. Just already the TEA took over for a lot of mismanagement that was happening. Different like grants were funded or bonds were taken out, and budgets were set for certain projects, and they ballooned to like 2, 3, 4 times what their original budget was. So there was a lot of like general financial mismanagement that was going on, but there was just a lot of stealing going on too. Devin McCraney was the finance director of BISD at the time, and Sharika Allison was the comptroller for BISD at the time, and they were both charged with wire fraud and conspiracy to commit theft after they embezzled $4 million from the district. These are people in the administration at BISD while embezzling $4 million of resources from the district while Woodrow Reece is on the Board of Trustees. I'm going to say there is no evidence that Woodrow Reece was convicted of any crime or that he was involved at all in any way in any of these schemes. But come on, all of this stuff is happening at BISD all around you the entire time. Either you are I don't know. I'm not saying he's involved, but you gotta be real freaking stupid to not know that all this is going on. Like, seriously, they're stealing $4 million. Patricia Lambert, the assistant superintendent, embezzled over $750,000, and she was directing teachers, staff at BISD to change the scores on their student star tests, to cheat on their star tests. Somebody else went to jail over the cheating on the star test too, like a teacher who was changing the scores. I guess she was like one of the only ones that they could prove did it. And Calvin Walker was a contract electrician for BISD during this period of time, and he overcharged the district for work that he did as a contract electrician. He submitted inflated invoices and avoided taxes, and whatever he was charged, he forfeited $3.2 million as part of a plea agreement, and was ordered to pay over $1 million back to the school district. Like, this is the stuff, you guys, that was going on whenever Woodrow Reece was on the board of trustees for the BISD. Calvin Walker still has not paid back even 1% of that $1 million that he's supposed to pay back. That's fine. We're still dealing with that crap. This is like the main reason why BISD has the reputation that it does. It's still pretty terribly mismanaged today, but it has the reputation of like being full of people who don't give a crap and just are there to make a buck and don't want to increase the quality of public schools. And it's frustrating because people like Greg Abbott, who is systematically working to erode access to public schools in our state and take funding from public schools and put it to the hand of private schools. People like Greg Abbott find ammunition for defunding public schools because of circumstances like this that happened with the BISD. The TEA took over BISD and did not relinquish control of the district until 2020, when immediately the next year Woodrow Reece was reelected. So Woodrow Reece was on the BISD Board of Trustees from 1998 all the way until so much fraud happened at BISD that the TEA had to come and take it over, and he was suspended from his position because the Board of Trustees wasn't functioning anymore because the TEA was in control of the district. And then immediately after the TEA moved on and the Board of Trustees could be formed again, Woodrow Reece gets elected to the Board of Trustees, which he has served on ever since. Okay, I don't know how this man is in the position that he's in. The same with Audwin. I don't know how people vote for this guy. How is he continuing to get voted into this position? I don't get it. I don't understand. More recently, BISD was ordered to pay $3.4 million in damages in a lawsuit that found BISD, in a ruling in a case that found BISD liable for civil rights violations following the sexual assault, trigger warning, by the way, the sexual assault of two former students. This is going to be some serious stuff that we're about to talk about, but Woodrow Reece has some wild quotes from his testimony in this case that are nuts. So I'm gonna go through some of this background, and then I'm gonna read a sizable chunk of a Examiner story that covers a lot of what happened here, and that has quotes from Woodrow Reece in it. In June 2024, BISD was found liable for Title IX and civil rights violations following the sexual assault of two former students. BISD was ordered to pay a total of $3.45 million in damages. Real fiscally responsible of BISD. Brandon Chillo was the substitute teacher that did these things. Brandon Chillo was teaching at Paul Brown Learning Center when sexually inappropriate contact with a minor was reported and known by multiple BISD employees with the authority and responsibility to stop it. Instead of firing Chillo for this sexually inappropriate behavior, BISD just moved him to Vincent, where he then sexually abused 2 more underage students. So that's crazy. We're going to read some of the story here. BISD first petitioned the court to assert immunity from the claim. The quasi-governmental entity leaning on the blanket get-out-of-jail-free card to ditch public oversight in the courthouse. However, as alleged by the attorneys representing the child victims, the school district is not barred from litigation as it relates to policies and procedures that deny rights entitled to all Americans. So these poor kids who were sexually abused under BISD's watch sued BISD and said that they're liable for the abuse that happened because you knew that he did it and you just transferred him to another school where you empowered him to be able to do it again. With Judge Troncalli ruling that BISD would indeed answer the allegations before a jury, parties presented testimony from victims and experts, as well as several current and former BISD employees. Testimony from the BISD Board of Trustees came by way of current board member and former board president Woodrow Reece. How they decided Woodrow Reece was the guy that was going to represent him, I don't know, but I'm sure they regretted that decision. Woodrow Reece, who served on the BISD Board of Trustees from 1998 to 2014, until millions of dollars stolen from BISD by staff and staff-sanctioned cheating on standardized testing prompted the TA agency to take over BISD and install a board of managers. Reece was elected by his ward constituents again in 2021 once the district was returned to local representation. Having been a fixture as a district leader for about 20 years, Reece admitted knowledge of Chillo's sexual assaults of students, as well as former Ozan High School band director Parker Ferguson's serial sexual assaults of students. Woodrow Reece knew that this was happening too. After acknowledging his awareness of several cases of student-teacher sexual misconduct having been prosecuted throughout several decades of service on the board, Reece admitted to knowing, as an individual, that policy and training procedures were insufficient. You just won their case, buddy. You can't say that. Even if this is the truth. You can't say that in court if you don't want to get convicted, if you don't want to be held liable for what happened to these students. Specifically, Ferguson, who was indicted on sexual assault and indecency with a child, acquitted in 2002, reinstated as a BISD employee, and later indicted and pleaded guilty in 2007 to improper relationship with a student, and Tommy Bo Granger, being indicted for indecency with a child, acquitted, and reinstated. Why are they hiring these people back? Were used as examples for which Reece had knowledge following their crimes. These people committed sexual misconduct while working for BISD, were found guilty of were charged with the sexual misconduct, but they were acquitted. And then they were hired back by BISD, and then they offended and were found guilty. I guess technically they were acquitted of the crime that they were accused of before, but they committed it again and they were found guilty later. If these people are convicted of these are alleged of these crimes, maybe we don't hire those people back. In hindsight, neither of them should have been reinstated, said Reece. You think? Adding insult to injury was the case of a teacher that made inappropriate sexual comments to a student and was said to have been allowed to resign before the complaint reached a level 3 grievance, which meant the board had no knowledge of the accusation according to its policy. See, if it doesn't get to a level 3 clearance, then the Board of Trustees isn't alerted that it's happening. And they can feign ignorance, I guess. Do you believe the board should be aware of all sexual misconduct allegations? Plaintiff's attorney Frazier asked Reece, to which he responded, That's difficult to answer because the board supervises the superintendent, not the staff. You don't think that the Board of Trustees should be made aware anytime an allegation of sexual misconduct is made against an employee of BISD? I'm not saying that like every allegation of sexual misconduct is, affirmed necessarily, but maybe the Board of Trustees should be aware that it's happening. Bring Reece back to the Ferguson case. Bringing Reece back to the Ferguson case of 2006, the BISD trustees' testimony was quoted, stating that the school district to this day needs to strengthen its policies to prevent student sexual misconduct, admitting that he knew policies and procedures were lacking in 2006. Nearly 20 years later, at the recent trial, Reece initially refused to agree that current policies should be strengthened to protect children from inappropriate conduct. However, Reece agreed so in a deposition just weeks prior. When asked why the policy had not been updated following any of the incidences of misconduct by teachers previously referenced, Reece said it wasn't a question he could answer, as that goes through the personnel office. Not my responsibility as the Board of Trustees of BISD. Reece admitted he never moved to revise or review training regarding improper student-teacher misconduct since 2006, whenever he said that he knew that it wasn't sufficient, and couldn't confirm whether or not his fellow board members had ever done such, but stated that he had conversations as an individual with the superintendent regarding changing the policy. Oh, well, that's good enough, I guess. I'm sure everyone would want improvement, Reece said, but we just stay in our lanes, said Reece regarding not pushing for implementing change in policy and training to further protect children against educator-student sexual misconduct. When Fraser inquired as to whether Reece believed protecting students was outside of his lane, the board trustee subsequently agreed in open court that policy and training should have been addressed following all proper cases of abuse. Yeah, just stay in your lane. That quote stuck in my mind when I first heard it. Yeah, they just stay in their lanes, My lane is not protecting children from sexual predators. That's somebody else's lane. As as a member of the BISD Board of Trustees. So that's Woodrow Reece for you. I mean, I'm not saying that he outright committed any of those crimes that were committed because of the before the TEA takeover, but he certainly was around for a whole lot of it, and certainly had an obligation to at least be aware that these kind of things were happening and to fight against those things. There's no evidence that he did that, and certainly I would think that the BISD Board of Trustees has is that human nature? Is that spiritual malfeasance? I would think that certainly the BISD Board of Trustees has a responsibility to protect students, but Woodrow Reece doesn't think that's his lane. So yeah, those are your two options for BISD District 3, Treva Johnson and Woodrow Reece. I don't know much about Treva Johnson. I know enough about Woodrow Reece to say that I personally will not be voting for him. So